What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and I'm here with Adam Hetenyi, head of game design for The Surge, and that's from Deck13 Interactive and Focus Interactive, right? Yeah, Focus Interactive.
That's right.
Is a publisher. Yep. So you guys know we've covered this a couple times on the podcast. I've been really interested in The Surge. It's something that for some reason, well, you guys know me. I'm always following like the post-apocalyptic robotic kind of stuff. And so the moment they showed The Surge, I was like, yeah, that's my style of game right there. So I was lucky enough to get Adam to be able to jump in here at the end of his day and talk a little bit about the game. As you guys know, these are laid back, so there might be the occasional cuss word. I apologize for that. That's just me. But sorry if that does occur. I would say they're not safe for work. For the most part, I am not safe for life. So we'll just jump in here. So Adam, we always ask, of course, how did you get started in the industry?
Sure. I started with a non-technical background. Kind of a lucky story for me. I'm originally an English graduate, so I have a degree in English literature. Yes, very fancy, I know. But I always sort of assumed I would never get to work in games. My younger brother is very, very technical. He's an engineer in games. I always sort of felt like, well, he's going to be in the games industry, maybe me, not so much. But I got lucky. So a friend of mine that I went to school with, he got a job on an MMORPG called Vanguard. They were looking for people who knew MMOs, but, had not that much experience, didn't really need a lot of pay. Right. I was like, hey, that's me. That's totally me.
I'll work for nothing.
I'll do it. Yeah, for nothing, for food and the place to sleep. Perfect. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to get a chance to kind of prove myself early on a game called Vanguard. After that, I worked on EverQuest. Then I went to this company, Tryon Worlds. I worked on the MMORPG Rift. And then another more casual, family-friendly MMO called Trove. I was the lead designer of that game. Gotcha. And then I came out here. So I've been in Germany working for Deck13 for almost a year. And been on Surge the whole time. And it was wunderbar.
Yeah, exactly. And you, as you said, you're over the culture shock, but you have moved around a bit. So he is in Germany. But it's actually a pretty good connection, which I'm pretty happy about. Sometimes.
You're more than welcome to come out and visit, get some schnitzel and beer.
Exactly. Starting the discussion about the actual title, what's the genesis of the game? So this is something that I ask every developer when they come on, game designer, anybody, even if you just heard and you weren't in on that first moment. But we always like to hear, especially fans like to hear, was it everybody sitting around, drinking some beer and somebody's like, I got an idea. Let's do Fallout and Dark Souls or whatever. And then it turned into the Siege. Do you remember or do you know what that genesis is of the title?
Yeah, I mean, it's we did Lords of the Fallen. Right. This is another game sort of in this genre, this kind of Souls-like genre, hardcore action RPGs, real tactical in nature. And it was something that we were really happy to do. So, of course, I didn't ship that title, but Lords of the Fallen actually was the game that converted me personally to playing Souls games. So
okay, gotcha.
Previous to Lords of the Fallen, I had tried Dark Souls. It wasn't for me at the time. I had just played Ninja Gaiden 2 again, and I really just wanted more Ninja Gaiden. And so I tried to play Dark Souls like Ninja Gaiden. It didn't work out very well. I was like, this game sucks. Only stupid people play this game. A year later or so, Lords of the Fallen comes out. I just got on PS4. I played it. It kind of converted me in. It showed me, what the games were really about, that you need to be more careful and all that. And so we knew we wanted to do something in that area. But that not everything in Lords of the Fallen worked out exactly the way we wanted, and we wanted to put our own twist on things. So we kind of set the genre already. We knew we wanted to do action RPG. We knew it wanted to be like a pretty tactical type game, focus on the melee combat. But we needed to put our own stamp on things, right, to really make it ours. And so that's where like the body part targeting system came from. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a few minutes, but you can target all the different body parts, cut them off your enemies. This is sweet, right? This is different. It's new. And then we also realized that these games mostly take place in a little bit of a stale setting now, or a setting that has become a little bit more stale. It's kind of like low fantasy, kind of gritty castles. Like classic Warhammer fantasy stuff. And so, it sounds simple, but it's actually, I think, a really interesting decision to say, I'm going to take some mechanics that I know I want to build, but I'm going to completely change the style, right, and the art direction and the setting, and try to figure out what does a level mean if it's not a castle, if it's not a field. If we want to build an industrial type setting, what does that mean for a game in this genre? So, maybe that sounds a little academic, but it really is that we decided the mechanics we want and then decided we needed to put our own spin on things to really make it ours.
No, I mean, that's perfect example. Talking to the people who created Neo, and
Yep.
Having the Japanese inspired and how they went about that is those same steps. They are academic, but there's a reason why it's called academic, because it's actually intelligent, and it requires some thought processes to make those changes. So when it so I guess you sort of answered this, that which came first. It sounds like overall the gameplay ideas came before a story got fleshed out. With that,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Like, we kicked around a lot of different potential settings. Considered different areas of the world. What sort of facility is this? How far in the future or not far in the future. So, deciding these main pillars, which were a little abstract, and then building as much texture and story and meaning around it is kind of the process that we wanted to take with this. And it's really kind of what we followed from the beginning to the end. I think it worked out pretty well, I hope.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, this is not on the list, so feel free to, if you don't want to talk about this. Was there, can you mention one other idea that you guys may have played with prior that didn't, like, whether it be a location or a time period or whatever?
Yeah. So we were looking at kind of all different places in the world. We settled on kind of like industrial United States kind of area, but we talked about India even, right? Which is kind of interesting. It's interesting. I mean, I can see you react. It's like, oh, okay, there's a lot to think about.
There is a lot to think about that.
It's a culture that's becoming more and more technologically advanced, right? And you still have the division between the very, very poor and the very, very rich. There's a lot of meat there.
Religious issues there as well. Yeah, that could be fantastic.
Yeah, so I mean, you think about like a super high tech Indian factory or something, right? There's something cool there. We ended up kind of moving away from that. There was a little bit of do we actually have people at the company who really know Indian culture? Maybe not so much. That's kind of a big risk now if we base an entire setting on something that we are not experts in, So that was why it was kind of like pushed away. But there was, it was under a lot of consideration. So, it was really just saying, if we want to have a facility, like a really huge industrial facility, where could it be? And the answer to that is lots of places. It could be all over the place,
right?
But we wanted to make it sort of, hey, Russia has all those sweet construction machines.
I know, dude. Yeah, with all their military.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's terrifying. It's terrifying right now. Let alone, if you're doing a post-apocalyptic thing where you can talk about technology being past ours. But that's very cool that you guys were thinking out of the box like that. And it does show, though, the difficulty, I think, like you said, of can you cover something if you don't have experts in that particular culture? Because now that's even without any purposeful slant, it's just becoming a political situation.
Oh yeah, I mean, hey, there's sensitivity issues for all these things, and it's something I care about. I don't want people to be offended unless I want them to be offended. I don't want to accidentally offend anybody. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that's the big one. Is if you accidentally do it, you messed up. If you do it on purpose, it's okay, right? I think that's the rule.
Yeah, well, stand-up comedian rule. You can say a lot of stuff when you're up there, as long as people know it's
just a joke,
exactly. When it comes down to the Surge, how is it going to really tell its story? So I played a little bit of it prior to this interview, and I'm going to play much more. They didn't really. It sounded like they didn't want me to jump in too heavily until I talked to you, which makes sense. But I did jump into it a bit, and I saw the operations center, and I saw, the moments where you're talking to a couple different characters. Is this game going to tell its scenes mostly in-game? Is there going to be cutscenes and chapter breaks? How's the story itself going to sort of be delivered to the gamer?
So we definitely focus on in-game storytelling, right? Yeah, for sure. We really don't want to take control away from you at all. We want the player to have the feeling that they're really in control of their avatar, of their character, and what they're doing all the time.
Right.
So we have the cutscenes sort of happen like in the world. We have this context camera command. It'll point the camera at the thing we want you to look at if you use it. Or you could say, screw that. I don't care about the boss flying by in the level. I'm going to fight this guy. It's really up to you. So we do that as much as we can to give you the freedom to observe it if you want, ignore it if that's what you want. It's all good. And then we layer the story in a couple different ways through the game. So like you said, we have audio logs that are kind of telling all these different areas of backstory that we want to tell, giving you, secret lore and then build out the backstory. And we lean a lot on environmental storytelling. something that we think is really, really important. It's essentially an artistic approach, but putting as much in each square foot or meter, I guess, in each square meter of the world, we want to have as much visual information as we can. So for people who are interested in digging into the lore and the background and for putting the pieces together, if they look more closely, then they can derive more information. They can learn more things, and they can feel like they're sort of pulling it out themselves, and it's not being force fed to them.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because at the starting, there's some graffiti on a wall that I saw on a couple things, and some of the stuff I was like, okay, I sort of get the overall idea. And then I noticed you guys did something I thought was pretty cool in the operations center where you level up. Over on the edge, I can't tell what it is. It looks like a dark energy machine, but in one corner there's this thing, and my brain was just like, what is this? Where you are indeed going, okay. Now, when you said the boss, I got to ask this question. When you walk out of operations, that thing flies above you and says you should be at work. Is that the boss? Is that what? How about this? Is that one of those kind of moments?
Yes.
Okay.
That is one of those kind of moments.
There we go. Yeah, let's not ruin anything. Because I saw it and it started talking, and I'm like, and what's weird is I'm assuming it's talking to me, and it names somebody. I think I don't want to give out his name even. Actually, I just remembered it, but I get it, and I was like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? Like, and you're right, it does tell within the game quite quickly. It also got me interested. A lot of games, especially the Dark Souls games, hey, I love them. And we're going to talk about this even just right now. The Dark Souls games, sometimes they're so abstract. They're so they're just so like, I guess I would just say vague sometimes in what exactly is going on and in their storytelling, that it's great for YouTubers to do a video about 10 hours of why I think everybody's dead in Dark Souls. But at the same time, sometimes people want to actually know at least a little bit. And I'm feeling in the Surge already this really cool push-pull of like data that I'm getting versus like, do I care about this thing over here? So
of course it's really nice to get that kind of feedback, and it's really helpful for us because we want you to be able to pull as much as you want to pull out of the story, to observe these different layers as much as you want to. If you want to listen to every audio note, you can. If you don't care about this, pass it by or just pick them up as collectibles, and of course, Vadi Vidya and Ouroboros, I think he does lore videos, and like Praise the Sun and all these guys, like they make an enormous hobby, maybe even a living by digging through the strata of all the Dark Souls lore, which is awesome and everything. But for someone a little bit more casual who is looking to be able to understand everything that's happening without having to go external, maybe that's a little frustrating sometimes, So you have to find a balance. You want to make sure that it's not being force-fed to you, that it doesn't feel cheap, so that if you pay attention, it feels rewarding. You know what I mean? But you can't then also make everything super, super invisible and difficult, or else people just won't care, or they won't realize that there's a thread that they can pull. They just miss it completely.
Right.
So it's hard to strike that balance, of course, and I hope that it works out. But yeah, I think it's a good approach. I think that it works out.
It feels, I haven't played a ton, but I mean, even right at the starting, even more so than a lot of the other Lords of the Fallen, which I was a little less positive about than I think a lot of people were. It had some bugs when it was first released and stuff, which I'm a big bug freak. Like, but I felt that Lords of the Fallen did a little bit better job at sort of identifying the starting story than some of the Dark Souls games, and that's okay because you have a game that's mystery, you have a game like Neo, which really has no mystery,
right? Exactly.
And then yourselves, which are in the middle. When it comes to Dark Souls, and we talked a tiny bit about this prior to the podcast, but when it comes to Dark Souls and sort of trying to, we're seeing this game is Dark Souls this, but this mixed in, or this and this, and you're like, everything is friggin' Dark Souls right now.
What does that even mean, really?
What does it mean? And for you guys, how do you what do you do that's not just the location, let's say, not just the time frame post-apocalyptic? What do you do to make it feel different? Is it just the combat, the horizontal and vertical? Like, what did you guys do to say, we want to stamp this, within the gameplay as ours?
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's definitely the main direction that we went to achieve that kind of goal. When it comes to movement and combat and the general feel of this sort of like tactical action RPG stuff, the Souls-like kind of feel, we don't want to break something that's not broken. You know what I mean? Right. So we don't want to say, well, they do animation locking, so we can't do it, right? I don't think that's a good idea. You need to take the pieces that work well, that people are sort of expecting, that they've gotten used to in some ways, and then figure out your personal way to put a stamp on it to make it unique. So for us, we always thought it'd be really cool to be able to chop off arms and legs, just generally. Right. Chop off arms and legs, that's a cool thing to do.
Cool.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like who's against that?
Yeah.
And so, every kid who sees Star Wars or plays with the lightsaber toy, this is the first thing they think of, right? You cut off the arm of that poor dude in the cantina.
Yeah, right.
And so there's a bit of a power fantasy, I think, with being able to lop off arms and legs and just slice people apart and take their stuff. So it's a nice starting point for trying to differentiate yourself, for taking something that's a little familiar and then putting as much of a spin on it as you can. So attacking from different directions instead of just finding the open windows, and then linking that in with the gear progression, I think is a pretty interesting and unique way to approach this kind of game. So, going back through areas is not just about traversing the space. It can also be about filling out the gear you didn't get before, or crafting new things or doing upgrades and all that. So I think it's good. The layers have linked together in a way that the progression through the game and the story and the completing the levels and unlocking shortcuts, all these things feel like you're getting like ticks of progress as you keep moving. So even if you feel a little bit lost, you're not completely sure what you need to do, or you need to investigate some things, you're still always making this progress, which I think is really, really nice.
Yeah, it's funny because in a recent interview, you did discuss that, you guys don't have technically a typical level progression. It's not first, second, third, fourth. You upgrade your core. And as you progress, you can, of course, chop people's arms off, steal their weapons, get more armor, which I have to say, I'm really pleased right now, at least, because I switched out armor and it looks different. I can't tell you how many games where you switch out armor and you're like, well, it's green instead of blue, and it's got it's a little bulkier. I got like a rhino leg, I think. And so my normal leg is like a little bird leg. And then you've got this massive rhino. I think it's called the rhino leg. And I'm just like,
it's the heavy, the yellow kind of heavy armor, right?
Yeah. It looks like I stole a bit off of Ripley's loader in the Aliens movie.
Looks like you should have to be forced to run in little circles, right?
It does. That's or take a lot of roids to get that one small leg bigger. When it comes to that, because of this kind of design, do the weapons as you progress in the game, do they become more powerful, or are you just upgrading them? Does their damage change as you continue on?
Yeah, so one of the things I think that makes Souls games cool is that you have a lot of choice. You can decide which weapon moveset suits you better, what you personally prefer, or what you find more powerful, depending on what kind of gamer you are.
Right.
And then same thing with your defensive gear. So we don't necessarily want to say, oh, you picked up the super two-handed sword in the last level, so it has to be the best weapon in the game because it's a big weapon and it's in the last level. But you'll always have the option if you like that weapon the most, you can always just upgrade that to whatever average level of upgrade you've taken your other things to. So even though you're leveling up your core power, which is more of an equipment weight sort of thing in a way. It scales with certain implants. Implants, are equipable things. Some of them are passive bonuses. Some of them are usable, like ability type stuff. And a number of these scale with your core power. So there's a little bit of pure level progression there. But mostly what it's doing is opening up more and more options for you in terms of how you decide to equip yourself.
Yeah, you just mentioned, because I have this question later about the power and how it fits narratively, and I was having it's better than most games, but I was still like, is there a narrative dissonance there where it's just like you're leveling up because you're grabbing diamonds and you're like, what are the diamonds? What's that do to? But the idea that it's
they're full of level up dust, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, man.
Magical pixie level up dust. So the idea of grabbing scrap and sort of, I equated it to the DeLorean at the end of Back to the Future. It's
banana peels and nails.
And I was thinking in your game, I'm like, okay, I'm sort of feeding it. And then the idea that it's sort of an equipment weight upgrade as well. I mean, that nails it. That is not something I thought of in the moment you say that. Like that sort of matches it all together. I really do like that idea. Can you give an example of like a later, or how about this? It doesn't have to be a later stage weapon or item, but something that you just really like that's an item in the game, like maybe your favorite weapon or one of the ones you like.
Yeah. Well, my favorite weapon is definitely in the what we call the twin rigged category. So this is like the dual fist weapon. So I'm sure you guys have seen like the guys with like the big like forklift loader weapons. Oh no, I'm emoting. I don't know if you can see I'm emoting.
No,
this is a
it,
forklift loader emote, right?
Yeah.
So there's a weapon type where you have smaller, more agile weapons, one on each hand, right? And it's really fast attacks. It's more combo-y. It's really agile and quick. And then one of the weapons in that category is this sort of like scientific themed like claw weapon, right? It's like a big metal claw. It looks sort of like if Apple made like a badass stabbing
Wolverine
glove,
claws
yeah, shiny and white and clean and nice. Anyway, so I really, really love the styling of this weapon. I think it looks awesome, and then I really like the move set. There's a really fun combo. I think it's one thing. I think it's a horizontal, vertical, and you do like a backflip kick and move backwards, so you get a lot of mobility by attacking. It gives you sort of an extra option for a backdash, an offensive backdash. If that makes sense. So I really like those a lot. Those are my favorite. I think probably my second favorite would be one of the heavy weapons, probably the axe. It's like the fastest. I think it's the fastest heavy weapon, so I like that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, when I was
I'm a different type of player. Sometimes I really, really like agile, fast, like roguey type. Sometimes I really heavy, tanky weapons. I don't know. I'm schizo, I guess, when it comes to weapon choice in Souls games.
I think it makes sense because I'm going to talk about this in the combat section, but I was impressed with the movement speed, and I think that of the characters instantly, I was like, "Whoa, this is not what I expected." Because
dude, it has to feel really reactive, right? It has to feel slick and reactive, and that's one of the things that we learned from Lords. I think I don't remember who it was. I think it was an intern that we were interviewing, or maybe it was like a publication or something. But they said the thing about Harkin, he was the hero in Lords of the Fallen. They said the thing about Harkin is he moves like a truck. He's like real heavy feeling, and getting him moving feels real sluggish and slow. He feels like he has power once he's moving, but it doesn't feel reactive. It doesn't feel quick, And so there can be a niceness there, I think, to the feeling of like slow, heavy power, like driving a truck in GTA or something, But I honestly think that the quick, agile, kind of stick and move type style is just way more accessible. It feels more fun, I think, more immediately. It doesn't have the same kind of learning curve. You don't have to learn to like it. You just start doing stuff and it feels good.
Yeah.
So I really think that is the absolute core of the combat experience in this game and other games that fall into this kind of genre, is that it has to feel quick and snappy and reactive, or else you're already dead.
Yeah, right. Especially in a game that touts difficulty or a Dark Souls style, and then you do feel like everything takes a good 40 seconds.
If it's hard, it has to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's really, really important if you're making a game that's designed to challenge people, that's designed to extract performance from them. It really, really, really can't also fuck them over.
Yeah, right.
So
it's sort of a weird combination. Are there armor sets in this
fuck them
game?
over fairly? Yeah, I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
I was just going to say, are there armor sets in the game so that if I grabbed all the Rhino, would I have a bonus, or is it just armor set?
Well, I suppose I'm revealing a secret, but yes, the armor sets all have set bonuses if that's something that is interesting to you. They're not super overpowered, I hope. I don't think they are. But yeah, it's
nice overall, like Merry Christmas kind of thing.
It's really there to reinforce the feel and the theme of that armor set. So you're not going to get like an agility bonus out of like the heavy Rhino set that you're talking about, for instance.
That happens too in some games. So I'm glad you guys thought of that.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that kind of just dilutes the whole thing.
Right.
You need things to maybe this sounds too philosophical, but when you have, let's say, possessions that you can acquire in these games, there's a certain essence to them, right? Each individual, you could all go all the way down to the long sword, right? Like say like the long sword in Souls game. There's something about it, right? There's a little bit of an essence there. And if you start making the long sword too much like a different weapon, it loses it, So I think that is a through line that goes through sort of everything you acquire in these games. And that's a very important piece of progression, is getting new stuff, testing new things, getting new knowledge. So, the weapon sets and the armor sets need to realize this in the same way.
Yeah.
They need to sort of like, if you want to go all in on a particular type, it needs to meet you in some way. You're expressing your intention to the game, so to speak, by putting on a full set of Rhino gear. The game should then respond to you and say, oh, okay, I get what you're doing. You're going super heavy. here's a little thing that pushes you further in that direction because you're clear that's what you're going for. I think that's nice. The important thing is that you don't pigeonhole people into only wearing a set bonus. If you make the set bonuses too strong, then breaking your bonus feels really bad. I think that's something that happens in Neo a bit, at least for me.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I'm just really, really bound into a particular set because the set bonuses are so many and so good. So not to criticize another product, but I play the hell out of Neo, and I have opinions about games. So
yeah, no, I love Neo. I mean, it's certainly one of my favorite of the Dark Souls style games, and I don't think most people would argue with you that I think some people do see the progression and they want to get an offset bonus, so they want to get speed for heavy, but I don't think most people do. I think most people understand that it doesn't really make sense if you are now wearing a ton of armor. Suddenly it's magically made of aluminum and you're going to be much lighter. Instead, augmenting that, like you said, you're informing the game of what you want to do. The game should respond to that, and even if it's a small bonus, makes you, because Dead Rising does that. There's a couple other games where you get something, you're like, I sort of don't want to switch because if I do, it like you said, it sort of hurts. It sort of is painful to break that bonus.
Your upgrade now has to be not only better than the thing you had before, but better than the set you're losing, right?
Yeah.
How often do you make a jump that's so big?
Exactly. So. It's so right. I cover sound, music, and voice in my reviews. I consider them equally as important as graphics. When it comes to sound, music, and voice, especially in a game like this, in Neo and Dark Souls, hearing an enemy off screen, getting ready for their attack. I mean, that's like the difference between life and death. We see it all the time.
Yep. It's super important.
Who's handling the sound, and are you guys using any special engines? If you don't, that's fine. But who's handling the sound for the Surge?
So we have a dedicated sound designer. His name is Daniel Dunhim. It's spelled like Dunchem with an umlauts, a dots over the U.
Right.
So he's our dedicated sound designer. He has authored all of our ambience, all of our sound effects, and then we work with an external partner for the music. So Daniel is our primary point of contact to the external partner. They back and forth all the time, but he doesn't also have time to fully compose every track. He's busy enough. But I mean, what you just said is absolutely true. It's really, really important to the readability of enemies. For me, like, there's a lot of bosses in Souls games that I fought that I didn't really learn until I started listening to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of times they'll have an audio cue that's easier to listen for and react to than the visual cue, especially when you have, the classic, like they hold the weapon up and then they pause for a strange amount of time and then finish. Yeah. Right. And the dodge timing on that is a total bitch sometimes, because you see the weapon move. As soon as you see the animation, you start dodging and it's like panic. That's no good. But if there's a little whoosh right when it actually starts coming down and you react to that, it feels so good. I mean, it feels so good. And it's almost unconscious, which is what's special about it, right? It now feels like you're just reacting. You're not like waiting for the right moment. It just feels the right moment because you're not thinking about it so consciously. So, the audio is really, really important. Not just for combat, of course, but to give the right tone, to make the levels feel appropriately scary, or not scary, depending. I think it's really cool that you cover that specifically. Many people don't. Or they play the game on mute, which I do not understand.
Yeah, I know.
I just don't get it. Kind of I do not get it at all. Yeah,
I just assume they're 7,000 times more technically advanced, and their ability is much higher than mine. But
they're like, they must be fighter pilots or something, right? They're situational awareness is through the roof. If you need no audio cues at all, you just know where every guy is around you. Yeah.
Well, in Neo, for example, in Lords of the Fallen, and Dark Souls, all of those games, I would say the high number of times my life was saved by hearing something that was out of the screen, and even if it was a boss, and going, oh shit, and dodging. Like you said, there's something just incredibly awesome feeling about that. It's far more like the way you would hope a hero would move versus having to look. And then, of course, visual overload. You get like you said, some Dark Souls bosses being so big, so many things going on without audio cues. Many times you're just sitting there going like, there's a lot on screen right now, and all I'm worried about is watching out for the 7 lava beds and flipping and rolling so that they don't smash me. So audio is super important.
And then I think No, sorry. It's fine. It's fine. I was just gonna, I'm pretty sure Daniel uses Fmod. I'm not
Fmod.
super
Okay.
familiar with audio software and middleware. I don't know too much about it, but he uses Fmod for most of our sound asset authoring and gluing stuff together.
Yeah, that's pretty
I'm not,
much
not I'm not an
typical.
audio guy. In my background, I'm a encounter, systems
Right.
mechanics guy. So, I'm like, Daniel, how's the sound going? He's like, it's going good. I'm like, super.
All
Keep
right,
up
good
the
enough.
yeah.
Who's handling the music? You said if you can talk about it. If you can't say their name yet, that's fine. You said it was an offsite composer or a contractor.
I don't know if I should say.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not 100% sure
It's
if that would be
absolutely fine.
a faux pas or
Yeah.
not. So I take the risk this time.
What kind of overall feeling and tone then are you trying to hit with the music? Have you guys at least discussed that, like what we're looking for within the music?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely you need some suspense everywhere. You need to give the feeling of danger, but and epicness in the boss fights, of course, right? You need to ramp up the action, ramp up the tension
Mhm.
for these moments to feel really strong and memorable. And it also needs to convey the themes of the game, so it needs to sound crunchy and industrial and metallic, you know what I mean? But without just being like 1990 Nine Inch Nails track, right? So I think that there's an interesting balance to strike there in terms of synthesized elements and bringing in non-synthesized elements and trying to maintain all these themes and feels in the levels. I think is challenging, but it's come out quite well. So there's a lot of places that are kind of tense, kind of scary. That's the nature of being in a derelict industrial factory where people crazy and they're trying to wrench your head off your body, right? So I think that's fair, but hopefully it doesn't get too stressful, you know.
Yeah,
in the end,
sort of needs to build, not just make it so overdone that people are like, I can't play. It's too much.
Yeah. For me, that's like horror games and VR horror games. It's like, nope, can't handle it. That's no, not for me.
Where they're using like a water phone, which is it's an old like 1970s instrument that they did a lot of horror movies. It's got a very discordant sound to it, and whenever that plays, my stress level is just like
really okay.
Yeah. Like I mean it, and they even use it in Headlander from Double Fine, and they use it in a way that is okay, but just hearing it made me go like, oh my god. Even though it wasn't supposed to be an anxious moment. So I think we all are attuned to those specific things. When it comes to making levels, let's talk just a little bit about levels. First, we'll switch this around from the order I had, which is the game sort of like one giant level? Is it hub-based? Is it level-based? How are you guys handling the actual game world?
Well, it's definitely level-based. Each individual piece of the game is its own, huge asset filled with other assets. But the levels are connected to each other in a lot of kind of interconnected ways. So, finding these shortcuts, finding these backtracking opportunities is sometimes not necessary, but is, I hope, rewarding and interesting.
Right.
So this is kind of like I talk about the different layers of the game. You're not forced to backtrack, but if you do, you're going to find some interesting stuff. So yeah. I mean, I don't really like open world as a term unless you're truly making like a big like a Bethesda or a Horizon type open world game. So I'm not going to say that, but the levels are hooked together in such a way that going back and exploring should be pretty cool for you. And then each level itself is kind of hub based, so a little bit of a hybrid answer to your question, I suppose. So each level has an op center you mentioned before. That's where you heal, restore your stuff, do your crafting and all that. And then as you play through the levels, you'll unlock shortcuts back to the op station. So as you clear an area, you get a shortcut. This is something I think that Bloodborne has done fantastically well. It's really, really a good feeling, to have checkpoints that are physical, not just save points in the world. You know what I mean? But actually opening up a gate that's a one-way gate, whatever, right? That can be anything. But it feels super, super nice to actually create a spatial shortcut instead of, like a super gamey shortcut.
Yeah, when it comes to that, one of the things that I had put in a question here is sometimes a game, Neo, for example, there was a couple times where the shortcuts back to areas felt artificial. Like it was like, oh, this is here. It's a one-way door. I have to get a key. But one of the things I noticed right away in the surge is coming down out of the operations center, there was a left, I think, when you're starting, and then you unlock something that basically comes pretty much straight to the steps. And it felt a little bit more organic. Do you guys, when you're making the levels, do you guys fight that sometimes where you're like, okay, Or do you not worry about it so much? Are you like, it has to at least make a little bit of sense? Or are you like, okay, this...
We try very hard to make sure that it makes sense. It's when the shortcuts that make sense are not as visible as we would hope, or when we do play testing, we realize that people are missing these things, right? Or they're like, Jesus, like I've been clearing through this level for like 50 minutes and I haven't found a shortcut. Where the hell is it? And in the meantime, they've missed one or two because they were very realistic but not called out enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is where we start having to do surgery to make sure that these progress checkpoints are findable and usable.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It doesn't do any good if it's hidden. If it's meant to be a checkpoint and it's hidden, it really doesn't do you any good in the end.
Right. Yeah, because it's not a checkpoint at that point. it's just some spot. Like if it doesn't work out. So I noticed it felt fairly organic, and it's something that I had picked up on. Lords of the Fallen, I think, actually did an okay job with that. But other games,
it wasn't too bad. I think that Lords could have been fine with way fewer of the save crystal things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the level design was not shitty or anything. You know, some of the spots were like a little rough, but none of it was like bad.
Yeah.
I don't think at all. You know, and so I really do think that they could have gone lighter on that and leaned a little more on the layout. But.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to combat, let's talk about this horizontal vertical thing. So we've replaced weak and strong attacks. We've gone with a horizontal and vertical. Explain just a little bit about the behind the scenes, like, how did that idea come up? And then additionally, I know it's for aiming, but can enemies defend against horizontal versus vertical? So I guess, how in some boxing games, you're looking for that opening.
Oh, yeah.
Does that happen as much?
Like
right.
Yeah, totally. There's a few enemies that do that.
Okay.
There's a few boss spots also that do that. That specific thing where they'll like hard deflect, a vertical attack or a horizontal attack. You know what I mean? But it's something that you can learn. Like I said before, it should be readable, right? You'll learn. Oh, okay, when they're in such a stance, they're going to counter me. If I do this, or they're gonna stun me. Push me back, whatever. So there's a few enemies that do that dynamically, and then there's an enemy that actually changes its armor locations dynamically. So it's a little more high tech. I don't want to spoil anything, but you're looking at these enemies and you're deciding, oh, he's a little hard. I don't know if I want to fight him such that I cut his armor off. Maybe I just want to kill him. So I'm going to attack his weak points because I'm clearing through an area. I'm trying to finish a level or something.
Right.
But as you start attacking their weak points, then they move the armor from the defended points to the weak points so that they become defended. So you have to kind of like switch your targeting around as you fight these guys if you want to be highest DPS or whatever, or kill them as quickly as you can. Then you're going to need to change your targeting dynamically as they sort of do their little slide puzzle to protect themselves. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I like the idea of not everybody having that too, but some people, because I think that depending on how mobs are done or groups are done, I've only faced off against. I think I've faced off against two guys because I've only played 30 minutes, and they were two of the same character. And I'm going to tell you right now, just those two pressed me to I was like, whoa, because they leap in, they do different and I wasn't expecting a leap in attack, and suddenly like one guy was leaping in, the other guy was using a power attack, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna stand here and get hit. But I liked it. Yeah, I liked it because there's those differences. When it comes down to weak versus strong and vertical versus horizontal, I see you got a combo system, which you discussed a little bit ago. How much is about the combos and how much is about the specific understanding of where you're going to hit? Are they weighted equally, or is combos a little less important than hitting non-armored sections?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, in my opinion, we weight a little bit harder on the protected, unprotected type mechanics. So performing like a full combo on your enemy, particularly on a vulnerable spot, that indicates that you got a really big opening, or you really read the hell out of that enemy. You knew exactly what he was going to do. You knew it was going to whiff right over your shoulder if you move this way. So there's a bit of a reward there if you get an opening big enough that you can get your whole combo chain off. But there's a bigger difference between hitting an armored piece and hitting an unarmored piece, I think. than the bonus of getting further and further into a combo without getting hit out of it or something, right? You're taking a bigger risk. You're going to get more damage. The damage ramps up as you get further in, but it can be pretty risky to do that, especially if you have multiple enemies, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
so,
I think it makes sense thinking about it. It really doesn't matter how you hit an armored piece. If it's armored, it'll do less damage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you combo an armored piece, it should do less than. So the idea of that weighting seems to be about right. I mean, especially for a game that hinges on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I think is that like all the enemies you fight, you're sort of choosing on an enemy per enemy basis whether you're going to fight them in a way that's more difficult, meaning you attack the armored pieces. It does less damage, right? It doesn't stagger them as much. But if you fight them that way, then you get a reward, right? You either get a schematic or you're getting the materials that you need to upgrade or to craft. But if you decide that you're clearing through an area, you're doing progression, you're trying to get to the boss, then you're saying, nah, I don't need to do that right now. I'm going to kill this guy and keep moving. So you always get to pick like hard mode fight, easy mode fight, right? Get loot fight, progress through the level fight. And having that choice all the time, I think is pretty cool. It adds a lot of texture to clearing through an area. When you're deciding, am I on a gearing loop or am I on a clearing loop? Gearing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that's actually something we've talked about in other titles where, you notice a thing where, let's say you just destroy a dude with a grenade launcher, but somehow the item that you grab from him is either unrelated or you blew off, and yet you still are able to grab it. So the idea that your guys' combat ties into, like, I'm going to attack this one specific area because I want to tear off that item.
I want that. I will now take it.
Yeah, I love it. So we talked a little bit about this, but I just want to hit it again. The speed at which the character moves is phenomenally different than, I would say Neo's Bloodborne's pretty fast. So Neo and Bloodborne is certainly on that scale. It sounds like you did decide that right up front or pretty close up front. When you were deciding that, how do you then offset like heavy armors and stuff? Are you guys, I see mobility, I think is the term. There's a term for speed or mobility. Like, how do you make sure that you don't get a really fast moving character, but then when you do put on all the Rhino armor, he moves like a tank? Like, what did you guys do for that? Do you just do a lot of balancing, play testing? Yeah.
I mean, I wish I had a more advanced answer for you than just we put it in and try it. And if it feels crap, we change it,
Gotcha.
I mean, it's like especially for that kind of thing, like talking about the feel of movement, and like combat reactivity and how far do you dodge, what are your recovery frames? Like this is it's all technical stuff, but it boils out into something completely non-technical. Right. It just feels a way. It either feels good or it feels bad. And sometimes you can't even quantify what feels bad about it. And sometimes you can. It's the good days when you can quantify what's wrong. Because then you can do stuff. If you're just like, I don't know, I like it, I guess it's okay, but I don't know, I just don't like it. What do I do? It's like that's a tough one. But when it comes to tuning feel and making sure that fast feels fast and tanky feels tanky and all that, it really is just like a guess and check. Like build off your sheets, see how it plays. Try different upgrade levels. Try like NG plus and NG plus plus, and see does it extend and work out. You just have to play and test. And if you don't play and test, you're never going to know.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned
it's really important
because we hear developers all the time saying that, like, I like the big mistakes because then I know exactly what the problem is. It's when the subtle, where somebody's played for 2 hours and they're like, I'm not as into it now, and you're all, oh shit, how do you when did that change within?
I'm like kind of bored. It's like you put a question in your focus test, like, when did you become bored?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Tell me which exact part of the level you became bored in.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't help. That's not a good question to ask.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, and it sucks I'm sure, like you said, as a designer to try to figure that, like, how do you I mean, do we just have people play the first hour and go, are you bored at the end? And then if they aren't, okay, now we'll do the second hour,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do that. Or it's not even sometimes about what the tester, and sometimes that could be like your wife plays it if she plays Souls games. Or, we bring in some college students from Frankfurt, who are working in like game development fields in their school. We bring them in, they do like a day-long play test, they write up some feedback. But even with the people that are like really conversant in the mechanics that they're testing, if you ask them, what do you want? What would you like to change? They're not probably going to be able to tell you exactly what they want, or they're going to make a suggestion to you which may or may not actually address their need.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it can sometimes be even more valuable to just stand behind them and watch, just like see how are they playing, right? Watch their face and see when they get frustrated about something, and whether it's the good frustration where they go, oh, I'm going to get that guy, and they come back and get him, or whether it's the bad frustration where they just kind of like, throw the controller on the table and go, what am I supposed to do? Right? That's bad. That's the walk away frustration. You don't want that. Yeah. You want the like go again. Like, okay, well, he killed me that time, but I go again.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you want. So yeah, just observing the gameplay, I think is incredibly important. It's something we do as much as we can. You can never do as much as you want, but
of course, yeah, QA and testing and all that stuff. It'll never equal the actual other parts of the development phase.
No, never.
So we talked a little bit about this. We'll end this part on this question. So we talked a little bit about narrative dissonance in games, pixie dust, level up dust, and crystals and stuff like that.
Yes.
Was that super important to you guys, like right from the start, to sort of at least make sure some things sort of made sense? Because in so many games, you do get weird oddities like that. For example, you said shortcuts that don't make, like, they're not visually there enough for a person to see it. Well, then it's pretty useless if that's the way it is. How did you guys go about those kind of things? And are you constantly watching for that, or is it something that you decided up front, this is sort of what we're aiming for? I mean, how did you go about, tying everything in with a narrative?
Well, I mean, like, form always follows function for this kind of stuff, right? At least that's my approach. So some other games are the opposite, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah, which is cool, right? There's a lot of games that are really, really artistically directed, and some of them are fucking great. So, but for us, with a core combat engine is sort of like the main method by which you experience the game world. The form has to follow the function instead of the other way around. So, in terms of trying to fit all your gameplay elements together in such a way that they're plausible and credible, in a web, right, cohesive all together, can be challenging sometimes, I think. But once you nail down your particular pillars, right, the things that you want to have happen in a game, you want people to cut off arms and legs, right? You want them to be able to build their equipment set based on cutting off arms and legs. We know that we want your combat to be based on some amount of tactical observation and reaction to your observation. So once you set those things down, those are the tough things, right? Deciding what you must have in your product versus what you can lose. So I think once you decide what you must have, finding explanations for that all work together is not as terrible as a process as some people have found it to be. You just have to. I mean, really, it's not rocket science, And I'm not trying to like make light of game development. Sometimes it's really, really hard, right? But if you're like, well, we have an XP system. What can that be? Well, it can be practically anything, as long as it fits, as long as it's not so far that it tweaks your bullshit alarm. It's basically fine. So that's sort of my bar, is that if it serves the function, if it feels good, and it doesn't set off your bullshit alarm, then you're okay.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer, because it is something that does come up, especially for these kind of in-depth games. It may not matter as much, for a more casual game, but these in-depth ones, people start looking at. Like you said, entire YouTube channels are doing, hour-long, dissections of a title, and having a little bit of that narrative connection, I think, always helps a person. And I think sometimes it helps a person when they are having other issues. Maybe they can't defeat an enemy, but they're really interested in how the world ties in. Then maybe it gets them over that little bit of a hump that might turn somebody else around and say, yeah,
that sticky point, right? Yeah. Where you want to keep playing instead of like you're still waiting to get sold on the game.
Right.
Yeah. All of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I do want to finish this level.
Yeah.
And if the reason for why you want to finish that level is because you want to find out about the weapon that the boss drops and you want to read the lore on the weapon, that's great. Yeah. That's fantastic. The other guy says, I want to finish the level because I haven't fought that boss before, and I will slay the foes that stand in my way. I could give a shit about where that weapon came from, but the point is that I get, nightmare slayed. That's the point, right?
Well, it's a little like the music where you said that some people turn on mute, So.
Yeah. I'm like,
it's like, I've never, why? But yeah, I hear it brought up a lot. In closing, and this is something we talked about a little bit prior to the podcast, I always like to ask developers, like, if there's some kind of funny bug or strange like something where they're like, the game is doing this and we have no effing clue why.
Yeah.
Do you have any for the Surge so far yet where you're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I mean, like every game has a bunch of those, I'm sure. Let's see. We had a really fun bug with, I was talking about the claw weapons earlier, right? Like the fist weapons. We had a bug for, I don't know, maybe a month where the renderables for these things were broken, so they just didn't display. You had the weapons equipped, but they didn't display.
Gotcha.
So I was doing all of my like level play testing. Like a lot of our levels were still in like gray box state, so we're testing pacing. Does this room feel good? What goes in this room? I don't know, but does the combat feel good? And so I was playing through all these levels, like barehanded punching and like karate chopping people's heads off their bodies and legs off their bodies, Yeah. And I was like, can we please just leave this in?
Yeah,
right. I feel super awesome walking around and like punching these dudes in their armor and then like slicing their body parts with my bare hands. This is fun, right? I want to leave it like this.
Yeah.
But the artist said no.
Oh, that's too bad, because there should be a Chuck Norris mode. Where you guys have like a god mode where you're like Chuck Norris.
The One Punch Man mode.
Yeah. That's awesome. Is there anything now that you've been working since August of 2015, I believe, on this? Right?
Sure. If that's an official date, then I will go with that. Yeah.
Wiki. So we can never trust Wiki, but
I mean, why would anyone lie?
Oh boy.
On the internet, much less.
When it comes to working on the Surge, now that you've worked on it for a long time, we'll say, is there anything that you're really, especially here in the later section of the development, that you're really like happy got in or really proud of a feature that got in or some particular thing that's just really working well?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it doesn't sound like a marketing thing. I promise it's not. But the feel of the combat is really, really important to me. This is why I play these games. There's something about it that kind of like digs into your hindbrain. I think it makes you want to do it more and get better. Right. Master the systems. And I think we hit that. I really do. I think the combat feels great. I think that your character feels great moving around. It's just is a nice, smooth feeling game. So. Even though I know that's like kind of a boring answer, right? It's like, oh, but that's super awesome thing. But I mean, truly, it feels nice to play. It feels nice just to engage with the game systems, with the controls. It's just good, So for me, that's the most important thing. It's the very first thing that someone will experience. It's probably the last thing that they'll experience in the game, and they're gonna experience it probably every like 10 or 15 seconds that they're playing the game, right. Or something. At least every minute or two, So if you don't have that right, why are you even doing this, right?
Well, and those amazing parts that you just spoke about, no one's going to get to them if the game's not fun to actually play. So
yeah, if it feels crap to move around, you're never going to engage in like tactical thought. It's never going to be fun to fight a boss. It's just everything builds off that. So I think we hit that. I enjoy playing my own game, which has not always been true in my life and in my career. So right. Hey, I mean. Like, there's a lot of developers who have never experienced the privilege of really, really loving the game that they're working on. Like that's a lucky thing. A lot of times you got to work on a thing, or you don't agree with your company's direction, or you got to pay the bills, right? And you can't do your dream project. So it's a real privilege, I think, to be able to work on a game that you want to take home and play with you. So yeah.
I have to say, I agree.
You take home and play with.
Take home and play. Well, it's all the same.
Yeah.
I have to say, I haven't played a ton, but what I did play right now, it's. I would certainly agree that the movement, the combat focus, and everything. It just, it is the starting, and of course things can fall apart. But I have to say, of all the games I played, because played all the Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Neo. This is one of the first ones where, really one of the first ones. Maybe Neo was close, where. Within the first like 5 or 6, seconds, honestly, of walking around, I was like, okay, I think I get this. Like, there's something, and I think a lot of it has to do with the speed. The lock-on system seems to be working really well. I'm not a big fan. I've never been a big fan of click to lock on to somebody else, but for some reason, this works. And I don't exactly know why. That'll be something that I'll actually investigate when I review it, because
there's actually also a toggle in the options for that. So if you feel like that feels crap, you can also, you can switch it to the like right stick move to change target, and then instead you use left trigger to do the body part targeting.
Gotcha,
right?
Gotcha.
So you have that option. It's kind of like a, if you were to describe to somebody who's never played the games, and we have this great option, it lets you change your lock-on behavior, they would look at you like you're speaking Chinese, But for people who are really in the games, we want to try to build in these methods for people to make it feel most comfortable for them. So we talked earlier about operating in a genre that's now established, right? There's certain expectations people have.
Yeah,
they want it to feel a certain way. Right. And if you deviate too far from there, then it's no longer going to feel to them like it's in the genre.
Right.
It might be adjacent or something, but it's not in the genre. So those elements you need to maintain so that people can approach the game using the skills that they have already built up.
Right. Yeah.
But then if we start twist on things, we have to let them manipulate it in such a way that they can make it as comfortable as possible. Otherwise, it's another barrier.
Yeah, well, I mean, how many games have we all played where you want to just change like control scheme or whatever, and you go in and they're like,
"Oh yeah,
you can't change anything," and you're all, "Okay, I guess I'm."
Yeah, makes me super mad.
Oh, it does me too. In closing, do you have anything anything you want to talk about or add on to this as we close up this discussion?
No, I guess. I'm glad I got a chance to chat with you today. So I hope viewers find this interesting. One would hope.
Yeah.
And I hope every single one of them purchases the Surge next month when it comes out in May.
Yeah, May 7th, May
something teeth, right?
May 16th. Yeah. Yeah, I will be doing a preview as well. So you guys will be able to see a preview. I think the preview is embargoed till the 10th. So you guys will be able to see that, and then we'll be posting this. And I definitely appreciate Adam jumping on here, especially at 6. It's now probably 7 his time, where he should be at home eating.
Lovely sunset right over there.
Eating some food and shit. But I definitely appreciate it, dude. What I'm playing right now, I have to say, is incredibly enjoyable. And I wouldn't say that. I would just end the discussion to say thanks. If it wasn't true, that's what I'm known for. And I have to say, man, movement and everything, at least right now, is nailed the F on. I was just really, really highly impressed with the way.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate the feedback. It's really good to hear that it's working for people. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react to the Surge in general, to get their feedback. It'll help us in the future. We want to do more stuff like this. So onward and upward, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks very much. If you want to stick around just for a second after this, everybody else, peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.
Deuces.